It's good to know you are watching Afrique Media. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us on another edition of Inside Africa. For millions of women across Africa, life revolves around fetching firewood and cooking on an open fire or stove. This has been a huge cost for their health and the environment, but that's about to change thanks to a new project in Seattle, America.
For millions of women in Africa, life centers around collecting wood and cooking on an open fire or stove. But now a project based in Seattle hopes to come up with a new stove design that will reduce the fuel used for cooking and drastically cut the deadly fumes produced.
So the new stove that we're designing in partnership with University of Washington and with funding from Department of Energy will be the most fuel-efficient natural draft wood stove for cooking in Africa in the world.
After witnessing the devastating deforestation in Africa, Peter Scott dedicated his life to finding solutions to the demand for wood fuel. So he established Burn Design Labs, a nonprofit specializing in stove technology for the developing world.
The smoke from those fires is killing roughly 4 million people each year throughout the developing world. In Africa, it's somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people.
After going through many test designs and rigorous field testing, Burn Design Lab recently launched a new charcoal stove in Kenya. The next challenge is to produce a better wood stove, particularly one that reduces poisonous emissions.
We're trying to make a efficient wood combustion in a or biomass combustion in a very small space. There's not much room for the combustion process to happen. And the result there is it's a real challenge to keep the emissions at a very low level.
And that's where the University of Washington comes in. In an unused basement lab, faculty members in the mechanical engineering department plan their contribution to the project.
As we're building computer models, and the advantage of computer models is that you can design a stove that might reduce emissions or be more efficient without building the stove.
For Burn Design Lab, the emissions reduction is a holy grail.
Getting a 90% reduction in emissions from a traditional open fire is actually very challenging to do.
It's a challenge that the University of Washington team believes that it's ready to tackle.
So I worry a lot about the pollutants that are coming out of fuels. So my goal is to try to use that to figure out how to modify these flames so they end up not producing as much pollution.
If all goes well, then the new stove should be in production and on sale in Kenya in 2 years.
We'll have an open source computational fluid dynamic model that will allow other stove designers to improve their stoves without having to go through as much empirical testing as maybe we go through now.
If the project is successful, it could represent just the start of a cook stove technology race in the developing world.
A scientist from Burkina Faso has won an award from Britain's Royal Society for his research on new ways to target mosquito swarms responsible for the spread of malaria. Scientists say it is vital to develop new tools to tackle the disease, as both the malaria parasite and the mosquitoes that carry it are developing resistance to existing drug and insecticides.
Burkina Faso has one of the highest rates of malaria in the world. After studying in France and the United States, Dr. Abdoulaye Diabaté returned home to conduct research into the reproductive patterns of mosquitoes. His findings have caught the attention of scientists around the globe.
The important thing about this mating system is that whenever you go into a field site, you will find, mosquito swarm at the same place every single day. And this kind of make it really very easy target, to struggle these mosquitoes and see how you can just reduce mosquito density.
Dr. Diabaté found that during Burkina Faso's rainy season, some houses contained 900 mosquitoes. The discovery that the insects swarm together to mate in the same place every year presents an opportunity to disrupt breeding patterns. Dr. Diabaté is focusing on the male mosquitoes.
So if you can succeed in killing the male, what will happen is that you will have a strong bias in male and female ratio. So you will have more female than male. And because the female really need the male to mate and then to be able to lay eggs, so if there is no male, no mating, no eggs, no mosquitoes. In this case, so no malaria.
The research opens the door to new malaria control technologies, such as engineered mosquitoes and sterile insect techniques. Dr. Diabate will receive $95,000 towards his research as part of the 2013 Royal Society Pfizer Award. Professor Sir Brian Greenwood of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine was a member of the award selection committee.
So far we've relied very much on using insecticide-treated bed nets, but there are concerns of resistance to the insecticide that are used for treating nets, and so really developing novel ways of controlling the malaria vectors is very important.
Despite scientific advances, malaria kills an estimated 660,000 people every year, most of them children. The British firm GlaxoSmithKline plans to submit an application to market the world's first malaria vaccine, known as RTSS. The World Health Organization says it could be rolled out by 2015. Greenwood helped to develop the drug.
It probably gives about 50% protection in older children for perhaps 3 or 4 years. Unfortunately, it's less effective in the very young ones who we want to protect, and 50% is not 100%, which is what we'd like. But I mean, it is a step in the right direction.
Meanwhile, Dr. Diabate says he hopes winning the prize will inspire researchers across Africa to focus on tackling malaria.
Now, for years, people in Ethiopia, particularly women living with HIV and AIDS, have been shunned. However, hundreds of women in the capital are being given a new chance at life.
At first sight, there may be little special about these sort of activities, but for these women, learning these skills represents something extraordinary, another chance.
Ever since we joined this training center, we have seen very good things. Even the women who got their training here told us they have managed to make a living out of the skill they got. And we are looking forward to the same changes.
This center teaches basic skills to women living with HIV and AIDS and shows them how they can support themselves.
Most of our former trainees are now in a better position. After the training, we have made them work in cooperatives and groups and have managed to make good money out of that.
There used to be a lot of stigma and discrimination in the society. I believe whether you're a patient or not, anyone can work and change.
After they have finished their training, the women are given a little money to set up business. More than 1,400 women have been trained here so far. Gumjalat CCTV, Addis Ababa.
Away from Ethiopia, let's now make a stop in Nigeria, where in order to reduce infections and risks associated with the disposal of medical waste, the Lagos State government has organized a National Healthcare Waste Management Summit in Lagos. This year's summit emphasized the need for safe and effective waste handling and disposal in view of the risk associated with it.
Speaking on this year's theme, healthcare waste management and the environment, experts say sustainability can be achieved if the general public is adequately enlightened on the implications of mismanaging medical waste.
We have the pharmaceutical, we have the pathological, we have even the hospitality waste, and several things like that. So they have to be separated because they have that various level of potency. Experts
also advocated strict adherence to proper medical waste disposal to save the environment from dangers posed by poor handling of health care waste. Lagos mode of healthcare waste segregation has been introduced to hospitals in the state to help prevent and control the spread of infectious waste into the environment. He emphasized that the segregation bags have the capacity to neutralize infectious waste.
It's a long list which we try to see to ensure that the waste are actually being passed through well. They have different containers for different waste products. Those are infectious, those are non-infectious, those are highly infectious. They're in different packages, okay? And then they are then disposed of differently as well.
Best healthcare waste managers in private and public institutions were honored. Some of them spoke to NTA News.
It was the best we can do by making sure we follow the best practices.
I would just advise them to follow rules and regulations and always ensure that they do proper containerization. The aim of this national summit is to sensitize healthcare givers, waste handlers and the public with new trend of healthcare waste.
We continue to talk health on this edition of Inside Africa. Now, despite many advances in modern medicine, traditional medicine remains on higher demand in many parts of Africa. In Cotonou, for instance, traditional bone healers are highly sought after, as many believe they are more affordable and the healing is instant.
In an old home in the outskirts of Cotonou, patients, especially those with fractured bones, come seeking a traditional healer. Traditional healers here are on high demand. For Imoru Akpaki Lafia, all patients that visit him have to recite certain mantras and incantations correctly, or else the healing will not be effective. Luke Gangsa's son fell from a tree and broke his arm. Gangsa did not hesitate to seek the old Imoru because the healing is much cheaper and immediate.
He's a special guy. If you don't have the money right away, he will still heal you. And during the treatment, you agree on the payment. Given my child's disease, he requested from me $10 US, a chicken and 3 shells.
Although he uses traditional techniques, Akpaki Lafia also borrows from modern medicine, like using bandages in his work. At the first consultation, Lafia only uses hot water and incantations. Patients from neighboring countries prefer coming to the traditional healer rather than seek medical treatment from hospitals.
No, I don't like to go to hospital because the hospital is very low and they waste money.
As for Lafia, his skills are also being passed on to the younger generation, as his son, who has enrolled at the university, is pursuing medicine.
As far as I am concerned, I am actually mixing what the Westerners brought to us and what we have inherited from our own customs.
Lafia's son believes that the training he receives from the university and that of his father's traditional healing will allow him to combine both so he can serve his people more effectively.
Let's now make a shift over to Ghana, where girls between the ages of 9 and 13 years will be immunized against cervical cancer free of charge. This is to protect the adolescent girl from contracting viruses that can cause cervical cancer. The First Lady, Mrs. Lordina Mahama, launched the pilot program in the Greater Accra region.
The HPV is a causal agent of cervical cancer. This is usually in sexually active females. To prevent the occurrence of the disease, Ghana is conducting a pilot program to administer the vaccines among adolescent girls between the ages of 9 and 13 free of charge. The Greater Accra, Northern and Central regions have been selected to pilot the program. In all, 17 districts have been earmarked for the vaccination, and all girls in primary 4 or 5 in both public and private schools in these districts will be vaccinated. The vaccine will be administered in 3 doses. After the first dose, health officers in the regions will ensure that all 3 doses are administered on schedule. The First Lady, Mrs. Lordina Mahama, launched the program with a call on parents to advise their daughters against irresponsible sexual behavior to avoid such infections.
We can and must intensify our work to prevent cervical cancer by vaccinating our young girls. I appeal to parents to ensure that their children are vaccinated against this preventable disease.
The Health Minister, Ms. Sherry Aite, said a committee to monitor the impact of the program has been set up.
We will appeal to teachers that you should immediately or contact the Ministry of Health should there be any adverse finding after we have administered the vaccine to the children. The committee will continue to monitor also safety and other adverse effects of the immunization.
Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, Gavi, is supporting the Health Ministry for the program. Children who are out of school will be registered and immunized in the second phase of the program. The exercise ends on the 8th of November.
Keeping aside here, the non-governmental organization Plan Cameroon have raised their hands to support quality education for girls, according to a report on the situation of the girl child worldwide. Much still needs to be done to ameliorate the situation of the girl child.
A report on the situation of the girl child worldwide by Plan Cameroon, a non-governmental organization with the aim of putting an end to gender inequality through its campaign Because I'm a Girl, shows that much is still to be done to improve the situation of the girl child. First campaign results show that 18 million girls in the world benefited from the campaign of giving the girl child her place in the society. A significant reduction of early marriages registered in 19 different countries, education improved in 27 countries, while gender-based violence reduced in schools in 18 countries. Despite the achievements, the director of Plan Cameroon, Famari Barrow, said recently in Yaoundé that much still has to be done, given that the girl child continues to be a victim of malpractices. He made the declaration recently in Yaoundé during a continuation celebration to mark the second edition of the International Day of the Girl Child, celebrated every October 11. It should be noted that this day is focused on creating awareness on the situation of the girl child worldwide and the challenges they encounter. In other words, it is an opportunity to put an end to gender inequality while promoting the rights of the girl child.
Bringing you more news from Cameroon, the Cameroon Music Association, SOCAM, now has a new president in the person of Ndedi Eyango, where the Makossa star was elected over the weekend after a long and intense election. Marigoreti Wifengla tells us more.
Ndedi Eyango henceforth is the new president of the Cameroon Music Association, SOCAM. The young artist from Kongsamba was elected on Sunday morning at about 4 a.m. at the Yaoundé Conference Center. Amongst 4 other contestants, Romeo Dika, Atebazo, Bienvenu Bega, and Musa Hassan, Ndedi Eyango was pronounced head of the Cameroon Music Association with an overall majority of 202 votes, followed by Romeo Dika with 112, with 126, Musa Hassan 113, Atebazo 61. After the first round, which placed Eyango at the lead with 38.33%, Romeo Dika coming second with 23.9%. Then was announced a second round, during which Romeo Dika and the other contestants jointly gave their votes to Eyango. This act of solidarity and trust bestowed on Eyango marks a new era to the Cameroon music world. Ndedi Eyango, overwhelmed by his victory, declared in the presence of all that he is aware of the challenges that awaits him, while the artists on their part congratulated their new president and also wait forward for the implementation of campaign promises.
We are now in Uganda, where an incubation center aimed at helping agribusiness entrepreneurs refine their project ideas has been launched. Housing at Makerere, housed at Makerere University's agricultural facility at Kabanyolo. The center is a joint effort between the university, the National Union of Coffee Agribusinesses and Farmer Enterprises, and National Agricultural Research Organization.
Sustained coffee production and export as Uganda's key cash crop remains a Herculean task due to the low level of access of improved varieties of seedlings to farmers. A consortium that seeks to elevate the platform for harnessing and sharing of ideas in agribusiness has been launched at Makerere University Agriculture Station in Kabanyolo.
One of our core values is our WIP, but whatever I'm saying refers to any other agribusiness products. It can be maize, it can be tea, it can be fruits, along the value chain from farm level up to when you have a product like this. All that I've mentioned can be separate business enterprises. You can decide to say, me, I will develop packaging, agribusiness packaging for coffee and other products.
The National Union of Coffee Farmers Federation, NUCAFE, now says this particular initiative would greatly contribute in taming the existing challenge, among others of improved seed varieties, to its members.
Now it becomes critical for CURAD to facilitate the commercialization, the multiplication of the resistant varieties through tissue culture. So basically, this is what QRD is doing to support those enterprises that have got the technologies from research, and the technology is to do with resistant varieties to coffee root disease.
It's now hoped that this drive would also enable increased interest, knowledge sharing, and competitiveness of Uganda's agro-production and processing.
Let's move over to Somalia now, where 2 decades of civil war and insurgency has left a deadly legacy of proliferation of arms and the remnants of explosive devices. Al-Shabaab are blamed for having heavily spread explosives in the whole of the south and central regions. UN Mine Action now facilitates the safer disposal of these items.
AMISOM troops defused landmines and other improvised explosive devices. Thousands of unexploded ordnance and what experts call explosive remnants of war are believed to be scattered in many parts of the country. Homemade IEDs have now replaced landmines planted on the roadsides.
We've had a presence of what we call explosive remnants of war from the 20 years of fighting in Somalia. And also the most recent conflict with AMISOM and Al-Shabaab. But certainly over the last 2 years, the onus has changed now to improvised explosive devices.
A constant barrage of landmines and improvised explosive device attacks have now become Al-Shabaab's asymmetric mode of warfare against AMISOM and the federal government. The common IEDs used are usually radio-controlled and are thus attached to a disposable cell phone and planted on the roadside. The controller then detonates the explosive by simply calling the attached cell phone when the target is on spot.
Certainly in some ways the IED is more dangerous. By its very nature, it's a homemade device that's made by people from Al-Shabaab, and therefore the actual construction and the quality of manufacture cannot always be guaranteed.
Over the last 2 years, IED attacks have increased. Experts say this is as a result of Al-Shabaab's change of tact from conventional warfare.
Al-Shabaab started to adopt what we call the asymmetrical warfare threat. So rather than fighting as a conventional force, they started to work and operate as an insurgent group, which is a common tactic when you're faced with a numerically greater force. So certainly from August 2011 until now, the use of IEDs by Al-Shabaab has increased drastically.
UN Mine Action Service is now working on ways to mitigate and protect against the threats of IEDs.
In Kenya, more than 300,000 people and half a million livestock are facing starvation in Turkana County. The county is facing the danger of another phase of drought. Already wells and boreholes are drying up, with some of the residents migrating to neighboring countries.
The scorching sun, loose soil carried swiftly by the wind, patches of cracked land, are all an indication that the north is drying up, and with that there is the fear of lives being lost. The ghost of drought is once again staring at Turkana County. Wells and boreholes are already drying up. Some of the residents of this area are forced to walk up to 12 kilometers in search of water.
Water ponds have dried up, and in fact, as we are talking, close to 20,000 Turkana herdsmen, pastoralists, are moving towards Loyoro.
And those who had been preserving water in these large water tanks share the same fear of what will happen next once their taps run dry.
The county has never had enough resources to rehabilitate water sources during normal times.
This well that has been serving a few here is on the verge of drying, and the water fetched from here is a treasure to residents despite it being colored. Children here are forced to drink the dirty water. As they have no option, it exposes them to waterborne diseases. Learning in the area has been disrupted owing to shortage of water.
These problems
It has lowered our performance even down.
Currently, some of the residents are migrating to neighboring countries of Uganda and Ethiopia. This exposes them to the risk of conflict and even war from communities in the neighboring countries. Recently, a 207 billion cubic meters of freshwater aquifer was discovered at Lotikipi Plains. This led to the migrating of some of the pastoralists to the area, hoping that the aquifer will be exploited immediately, but that was not to be. Aside from the drought, the area is also infested with locusts. The locusts have destroyed the little that remained on the farms. In 2011, the Kenyans for Kenya initiative was launched and 500 million shillings was raised towards relief for 3 million Kenyans who are facing starvation in the northern part of Kenya. The initiative in northern Kenya through Kenya Red Cross targeted 3 villages with a population of slightly over 15,000. 4 boreholes were constructed and the people were taught farming techniques and irrigation. The project is currently doing well.
And now the southern African nation of Zimbabwe is reportedly experiencing its worst food shortage in 4 years. Tens of thousands of people have begun receiving food aid across the country.
Help to stave off hunger for at least another month. Cattle ranching Rishavane is the worst affected. The cattle are too scrawny to either sell or to slaughter. The World Food Programme estimates that compared to last year, 33% more people need assistance.
My wife and I look after our grandchildren, and we have had to ration our food to survive this lean season.
The World Food Programme says it will provide 1.8 million people with the very basics: sorghum or maize, beans and cooking oil. It's the first meal that the Hove family has had in weeks that they haven't had to beg for.
When we don't have, my wife asks for the basics from the community: mealie meal, sugar, oil, things like soap we get from my brother-in-law who lives in South Africa.
There are also reports of more children dropping out of school and the hungry relying on wild fruits.
When we went to mobilize the communities, those are the stories that we heard. How are people coping? Because the first question was, between harvest time and now, how have you been coping with food insecurity?
The Commercial Farmers Union points to a chaotic land reform program, but the World Food Programme says poor rains, high unemployment and high cereal prices are to blame for the food shortage.
WFP is implementing what is called a Food for Assets program. Essentially with this program, we are building sustainable community assets. And the longer term objective of this particular initiative is that people will increasingly be self-sufficient.
It hopes that the current food aid will at least encourage beneficiaries to plough for the next season. But again, they will be subject to the whims of the rains.
It is on that note that we come to the end of today's edition of the program. Thanks for your time and keep watching Africa Media for more news.